Listen to a modern political debate on foreign policy, or open a guided mindfulness app, and you will likely encounter the exact same source material. Ancient quotes from Jesus of Nazareth are constantly deployed today as universal moral maxims, meant to apply to everyone, everywhere, all the time. But applying these ancient rules to modern macro society quickly creates obvious logical breakdowns. If you literally turn the other cheek during a violent street assault, or use it as a national defense strategy against a hostile military, the result isn't profound moral high ground. The result is practical nonsense. The core problem is that modern readers regularly strip these texts of their actual historical grounding. We take words spoken in a highly specific, highly volatile first-century Judean political environment and treat them as generalized poetry. When you put the history back in, a completely different reality emerges. These famous sayings were never meant for the general public. They were never meant for geopolitical states, and they were never meant for modern individuals. They were strict members-only guidelines written for an exclusive, highly insulated brotherhood. Projecting modern inclusive universalism onto ancient survival texts creates endless philosophical contradictions. To actually understand what these words meant, we have to stop reading them as self-help and start reading them through a sociological lens to see the intense in-group dynamics of the early Christian community. This is a section of the Sinaitic manuscript, one of the oldest surviving Greek Bibles. Extracting precise pronouns from dense, unspaced texts like this reveals a primary mechanism for how we misunderstand the original context. Specifically, English translations often fail to distinguish between the singular you and the plural you all. Take one of the most famous spiritual quotes of all time, "The kingdom of God is within you." Grammatically and historically, this translation is false. The correct translation of the Greek pronoun here is plural, and the preposition is spatial. Jesus is saying the kingdom is among you. He is addressing a collective group of people, not an individual's internal emotional state. We see this exact same grammatical shift in the Sermon on the Mount. "Blessed are the poor" is a mistranslation. Jesus is speaking directly to his specific, immediate followers. A historically accurate translation is, "Blessed are ye the poor." It is a targeted message to his brotherhood, not a general blessing for all impoverished people across the globe. Through this linguistic lens, the phrase "kingdom of God" stops acting as a metaphysical destination. It becomes a functional, sociological synonym for a specific physical in-group. When a small, radical community isolates itself from the broader world, it requires strict internal regulations. Without a tight legal framework, these fringe groups rapidly destroy themselves from the inside out. Once you realize the intended audience is the in-group, the behavioral commands suddenly make practical sense. Turn the other cheek is not a command for global pacifism.
It is a highly specific mechanism for internal dispute resolution, a strict requirement for two reconciling brothers to de-escalate tension within the camp. We can visualize this brotherhood as a tight-knit survival network. Every rule is designed to keep these connections intact. Consider the famous rule against looking at a woman with lust. In ancient Hebrew culture, basic desire wasn't the issue. The contextual translation reveals the specific threat. Do not look at a married woman. Specifically, do not even think of coveting a brother's wife. An internal affair would fracture the trust lines of the community, causing the fragile network to collapse entirely. This pattern holds true across the texts. The command to forgive others is clarified in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 18, as a command to forgive brothers. These directives are members only. They are a legal framework painstakingly designed to keep a precarious, marginalized community unified against intense external pressure. This photograph shows the rugged, isolating shores of the Sea of Galilee. It's a reminder of the harsh, physical separation between this first-century Judean community and the prevailing society around them. Understanding how they treated each other is only half the equation. We also have to look at how they viewed everyone outside their circle. This brings us to perhaps the most widely misused quote today: "Do not judge." Once again, the historical context demands a different translation. "Do not condemn brothers." Here is a visualization of the early community's worldview. The reason the text doesn't tell them to avoid judging the outside world is startlingly pragmatic. To this specific community, the entire outside world was already condemned to destruction.
There was absolutely no utility in trying to fix, judge, or regulate a broader society around them. The singular goal of this movement was to pull individuals out of the condemned zone and place them inside the safety of the brotherhood. This stark, apocalyptic boundary between the safe in-group and the doomed out-group shatters our sanitized, modern perception of these texts as an all-inclusive, worldly philosophy. Compare the strict, survivalist reality of this ancient group with the modern politicians and wellness gurus we started with. The original intent of these words has been almost entirely inverted by modern society. There is a distinct danger in projecting modern Western individualism onto ancient texts. When we force rules meant for a closed first-century sect onto 21st-century global ethics, we end up with philosophies that simply cannot function in the real world. Restoring the context forces us to reevaluate the historical figure of Jesus. He was not operating as a modern self-help guru dispensing generic wisdom. He was the architect of a radical, insulated sociological movement, drafting specific legislation to keep his people alive. When we stop demanding that ancient documents solve our modern global problems, they stop reading like contradictory advice. Instead, they become clear, fascinating charters that show exactly how an early human community organized itself to survive against the odds.